What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Kiev, the beautiful city in Eastern Europe. It's been super cold here the last couple of days. It's been like minus 17, minus 20, even minus 25 at night. And so I'm not a huge fan of the cold weather, but that was pretty extreme. Anyway, in this video I want to talk about how I was robbed in Ukraine and in Kiev specifically. And I want to divide this video into three parts. The first part is gonna be my experience with travel, my brushes with danger, things I learned while traveling around. Then I'm gonna tell you the story, exactly how it happened. And then I'm gonna close up with some learnings, some things I learned, some things I would do, some things I wouldn't do in Ukraine, in other countries. Just some, tips and advice, stuff like that. And so I am originally from Ukraine, but I grew up in the United States, but I also traveled and lived all over the world. I lived in Latin America for like 7 years, and Latin America, in my experience, is a lot more dangerous than Eastern Europe. I guess it depends where, but for the most part it's a lot more confrontational than Eastern Europe, and that has been my experience. And so I am not a stranger when it comes to living abroad, to taking care of yourself. I believe I have some street smarts that I developed over the years, and especially places like Brazil, which is very, very unpredictable. And so I'm not some newbie that just came. And so coming into Ukraine, I knew what to expect. And in a way, what happened wasn't a complete surprise, but it's something I did not expect. And so having said that, let me tell you what happened. So this was a couple of years ago, and at that time I didn't have a permanent place. I was basically moving around, and I didn't have an apartment that I was living for a year in, like I have now, a lease. I didn't have none of that. And here in Ukraine, it's really easy to get an apartment for a day, 2 days, a week, a month without a deposit, without any issues. And so that is exactly what I was doing. I was kind of this traveling gypsy, and it's nice. It was a nice lifestyle. The fact that I can go into a city, rent an apartment for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, and then move somewhere else. That is exactly what I was doing. And so what happened was, I was renting apartments here in Kiev for like a week, 2 weeks, and then I decided that I needed to go to another city. And so I went to another city, and then I came back to Kiev. And then I decided to do something that I don't really do that much in Ukraine, and that is rent an apartment via Airbnb. So I got an apartment for about a week, an Airbnb, in a nice neighborhood. It wasn't in the center, but it wasn't far away from the center. It was still a really good neighborhood. It wasn't one of these, kind of these marginal neighborhoods on the outskirts of town. It was a pretty good neighborhood. And I checked in, and I needed to leave Kiev and go down to Odessa the very next day. In fact, I had to leave that night and go to Odessa. And so I checked in about 6 p.m., spent a couple of hours just hanging around, and decided to catch a night train to Odessa. And so the idea was, I would go to Odessa, I would arrive on the night train, I would do some personal things that I had to take care of, and then I would come back to Kiev the next day and do some personal things in Kiev. Odessa, I didn't need to spend a lot of time on Odessa. It was purely something for like maybe 5 hours, meaning like I would arrive there in the morning on this night train, do a couple of things, and then get back to Kiev in the afternoon. And so I went outside. I already had bought my tickets to the train, and I went outside and ordered a taxi on Uber and was waiting for my taxi. And at that point, I realized that maybe I should take my documents or my passport, and my passport actually, and even my laptop with me, because what if it's going to be boring on the train, I won't be able to fall asleep, and what if I would need to spend more time in Odessa than necessary? And thank God I took it, because obviously if I didn't, I would not be seeing those things anymore. And so I went back to the apartment, grabbed everything, grabbed my passport, grabbed my my documents, which is very important, my passport, took my laptop, which is like super important to me, my trusty laptop, and I took the taxi, and I went to the train station, and I took the night train to Odessa. I spent about 5 hours in Odessa, and after that I finished my personal things, my personal business in Odessa, and I needed to come back to Kiev. So I did the same thing. I took the day train back to Kiev, but I didn't go straight to the apartment. I essentially did a couple of things. I had to attend some business. I didn't go directly to the apartment. I did some things in the city, and I only ended up going to the apartment around in the evening, so like maybe 7-8 p.m. or maybe even later than that, I don't remember. So in that evening I was back to the apartment, and so as soon as I entered the apartment, I feel something is not right. Even before I entered the apartment, I noticed that just this eerie feeling of something is off. Maybe it wasn't locked all the way, or maybe it was only locked on one of the locks instead of two. And so I remember entering it, and right away I see the little label, the string that you attach to baggage, to your luggage, so you can identify it in the airport when you are, when you landed. And so right away I see that it's hanging on the floor. It's basically on the floor. So I'm like in shock. So I immediately look at the place in the living room where that luggage was supposed to be, and I see that it's not there. And obviously I didn't unpack it and put it all over the apartment. I knew I would be staying in that apartment in just a few days, and I see that the luggage is not there. So I'm in like this complete shock at this point. I can't believe this is happening. I'm like, what is this? Like, maybe, it's not even shock. It's more like this disbelief. I'm like, well, maybe I've hidden it somewhere. Maybe it's under the bed. Maybe something happened to it. I cannot believe it's not there, because these kinds of things, it's unexpected. It's complete shock. And so I look for it, and it's not there. And the thing about it is that nothing else was taken. There's nothing else out of the ordinary. The only thing is missing is my luggage, and obviously everything that was in my luggage. Okay, so all my clothes, I had some really good documents, some old photos that I was getting for somebody, just some things that I bought over the years, my jiu-jitsu kimono, my jiu-jitsu gi, my blue belt that I got in Brazil. I didn't lose a lot of money. There wasn't that much money in the luggage, but I lost a lot of things that I carried with me for many, many years. I had that blue belt given to me by a famous Brazilian instructor that, I got back in 2010. And so that was really sad that I lost that. I lost the kimono. But what annoyed me about the fact was the fact that, I just lost the luggage. Just somebody came in and took my stuff. And so I'm like, okay, so what do I do? I call the owner of the apartment, and I tell her, okay, of the situation, that she needs to get back ASAP, and she needs to change the locks, and she needs to tell me what the hell happened, right? And so she comes in. I think in an hour she arrived, and she changes the locks. She got somebody to change the locks, and she's in shock too. All of this, nobody knows what's going on. And obviously I don't feel comfortable staying in that apartment anymore. And so, I'm gonna cancel my Airbnb. You have to compensate me for, for this, if there's gonna be some cancellation fees and all that. So we get into this huge argument. And while I'm talking to her, I can't help but to think, like, who could it have been? Because, while I don't have proof that, I don't know who it was, but I can't help but to think that maybe, just maybe, she had something to do with it. This is just my gut feeling, because I learned in life is that, not a lot of things happen by accident. A lot of things are cause and effect. So I start to think, okay, wait a second. Maybe, just maybe, she had something to do with it. And so I had some documents there. I had some really, just very tangible information, tangible things for me that weren't really worth to anybody. So I tell her, look, if you know who did it, it would be great if you maybe tell them and they can return the documents. I don't care about anything else. But she denies it. She's like everything. And honestly, I cannot prove who it was, right? I cannot say. It could have been a random person. It could have been anybody. I could not have proved who it was. But that's what happened. So they stole my entire suitcase. And thankfully, I'm so thankful, I went back that night and got my passport and my laptop and all this. Because if that was stolen, it would have been a lot more painful. Because at the end of the day, I did have very cool stuff that was stolen. Some of it was replaceable, some of it wasn't. It could have been a lot worse than it could have been. I'm really fortunate that I ended up taking my laptop, especially, and my passport and all these things with me. So that was very, very important. And so let's talk about kind of the aftermath of the whole thing, right? So I went to the police, and I don't want to go to the police. I was like, what are they gonna do? But then I thought about it. Well, what do I have to lose? I went to the police. I told them. The guy took my notes. He looked at the Airbnb. He, told me that they're gonna get in touch with her, ask her who it could have been, who might have had the keys. And remember, the other thing about it, there's no signs of breaking and entering. So somebody either picked the lock or they had the keys, and nothing else was stolen in the apartment, right? So they knew what they were doing, right? They knew what they were looking for. Otherwise, there was nothing ransacked. It looked perfect. It looked exactly how it was, essentially, except it didn't have my suitcase there anymore. And so these are some of the other factors that I have to mention that are important as well. And so that is something to consider. So I told the police all that. They said they're going to get in touch and all that. They're going to call me back. Unfortunately, I had to leave Kiev and spend about a week and a half in another city. And then when I came back, I followed up. And I don't remember what it was, but nothing really came out of it. And I essentially kind of expected that to happen. And so that was a crazy experience, which has never happened to me ever in all the years of traveling. I think the worst thing that has happened was when I had my phone stolen in a Bogota, Colombia hostel. And I didn't even realize I had it stolen. It was just I was sleeping and I thought I lost it. And then I saw that it had some Skype calls from a Colombian number to a Colombian number. So then I realized maybe it fell out, somebody took it. But that is the worst experience I've had. And so this obviously shocked me. It kind of changed my understanding of it, and it kind of changed the way I act, the way I think. And so what are my kind of thoughts about this whole thing? Well, what I'm about to share is obviously it's my own thoughts. Okay, this is just my own experience, my own ideas. And obviously they're very good people here. And they're, great people everywhere. They're great people in Ukraine. They're great people in the US. And they're also not so great people in Ukraine and the US and everywhere. So it's not, this occurrence does not kind of display everything that's happening. And so that is something you have to understand from my experience. But having said that, what's the results I can draw from this? Well, number one, if you are, at least that is my own experience, right? I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just sharing my point of view. If I'm renting an apartment, I have to be careful with some of the things there that might get stolen. So I'm not gonna, bring something. I'm not gonna put something anywhere if I'm not willing to lose it. Very, very simple. That's kind of the thing. So if I have an apartment and I have some expensive stuff over there, and let's say I go somewhere or somebody finds out, it might not be there, right? And police are not going to do anything, and nothing is going to happen simply because it's not that kind of country, right? It's not Denmark or Iceland. Okay, so that's the first thing you have to understand. The second thing you have to understand, this is kind of obviously it's my thoughts, is that you would never want, if you're living in Ukraine, obviously this is more applicable to when you're living, is like I would never want to anybody to know that I have something expensive in the apartment. So let's say I bought like a 60-inch Samsung QLED TV. I'm not going to be parading that TV in my area where I live, so everybody can see that James at this apartment has this TV. Okay, I'm not gonna do that, and nobody does that, right? Nobody does that here, and that's because people really don't show off, but also because of these weak weak security. So I would never do that. That's kind of the first thing, and that is why the trust is not very high here, right? Nobody kind of knows each other. I only started to kind of talk to my neighbors after like 6 months of living there, because everybody kind of keeps to themselves. And obviously this would be completely different if I lived in some, nice, affluent, Houston suburb or San Diego suburb where everybody is wide open. How are you? How are you? Yeah, they're fine. I know that they have nice cars. They have a nice TV at home. They have an expensive sound system, maybe an expensive laptop. And that's fine because I know that, they have police, they have things, and they have security. Where here you don't really have that. And so you have to kind of be careful, and in my opinion the best way is not letting other people what you have, obviously, because my experience is a lot of these things aren't really random. There's no random people walking around. Random does happen, but for the most part I think it's planned. I think people knew exactly what they had. And so in my apartment I feel like this was an Airbnb, and they probably knew that maybe I had money in the suitcase, maybe I had this, maybe I had that. That's my personal view. Obviously I can't prove it, but that's the feeling I have. And so that's kind of the thing. It really brought a sour taste to my mouth. And in terms of security and overall security, are you gonna get robbed if you come here? No, of course not. The risk is gonna be low. And it's not gonna happen. But the risk, the chances are greater than zero. But it's not like a place like Latin America or in some places like in Brazil or something where you're walking around and you could get something happen to you on the street. The chances of that here are fairly low. But having said that, these kinds of thefts, things like that do happen from time to time. And so you kind of have to be aware of it and adjust to it as it occurs. Obviously it will only happen once. Hopefully that's going to be the first and the last time. But that's kind of the reality of living here, and that if it does happen, you have to understand that police aren't really going to do anything because they have other things to do. It's not really it's not something huge that attracts PR and publicity and all that. And so the chances are they're not going to really do something. But that is something to keep in mind. But for the most part, I'm happy to say that it's definitely a lot safer than places in the West. Eastern Europe is a lot safer than places in Western Europe, in the US. It's safer than like places like New York, where I lived for many years. Definitely safer than Latin America. But you have these very non-confrontational situations that happen every now and then. All right, guys, so this is something I wanted to cover, wanted to talk about, just get it off my chest. Really hope you've gotten value from this, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them below, smash a like if you enjoyed it, you've gotten value from this, and I will see you in the next one.